Some of the most common mistakes made in the entire aquarium hobby is not feeding your marine organisms properly. So today we're gonna go over some of the common mistakes made when feeding your fish.
Exactly, starting off with a big one, overfeeding and underfeeding.
Yeah, so this is easy, right? You wanna make sure that your fish are eating when every time you feed a little bit in there, right? And if you don't see a fish nibble on something, especially for the new hobbyists, they're gonna get a little stressed. They're gonna think, oh, my fish isn't getting enough, and then you're gonna throw more food in there, right? And create that nice glitter storm of food inside of your aquarium. That's the wrong way to go. So think of it as the fish in nature are actively seeking food out, right? So they wanna have that feeding response. There's not a cloud of food around them. And when there is, they're not going to be that anxious to drive at it. So feed a little bit, feed sparingly. And if you're wanting to make sure that they're getting the nutrition they need, feed sparingly, but do it more frequently.
Exactly, and this is also very important for species like anthias, which are used to eating small amounts often.
Right, and then other organisms like tangs, they're grazers. These things are eating constantly, all day searching. So make sure that they have a food source like nori 24/7.
Another mistake is going to be ignoring signs of poor nutrition in your fish.
Yeah, and this is pretty easy to do because a lot of people want to try to, they watch and hope that that fish is just going to recover on its own, but really keep an eye on it. If you start seeing, your fish starting to get really thin, maybe acting a little lethargic and just not giving you that feeding response that you're used to or that you want to see, maybe it's time to switch things up. So an easy thing to do is ask the local fish store where you got that fish, hey, what were you feeding it? Especially if it looked good when you got it. But then try a varied diet. If you're not feeding nori or something like that for a tang, make sure you're adding that to their diet. If you're not feeding the right carnivore diet for your carnivore that you've got, switch things up. But make sure that they are taking that food. And there are some things you can do to try to trigger that feeding response if you're not getting it. Jason?
Exactly, so Brightwell has a really good product called Garlic Power, and basically this is going to help entice your fish to eat. Also, there could be some health benefits with the garlic. Either way though, a really good way to improve coloration, increase feeding response, etc. Another very common mistake is not feeding the right sized food for the fish in your aquarium.
Yeah, so a lot of these kind of tie together with making sure that you're selecting the right food for your aquarium inhabitants. But this is a really simple one to overlook. If you're just feeding, say, frozen mysis, or you're just feeding maybe one type of pellet, there may be fish in there that aren't able to consume those just because of the size of them, right? So if you've ever seen certain maybe filter feeding gobies, things like that, trying to reach for mysis shrimp or something along those lines, it may look like they're eating it or they're trying to eat it and they just can't swallow it. So pay attention to that. Other fish, like maybe some wrasses, these pellets and things, they come in different sizes. Make sure you're looking for different size foods that will fit actually into the mouths of the creatures that you're trying to feed.
And another mistake, don't forget to use the feed mode.
Yeah, so you don't want, like we talked about, you don't want that confetti storm of food flying around your tank. Some of those fish, they're natural, they like to chase down things, others do not. It's gonna make them a little bit more likely to just watch that food pass on by. So use feed mode when you've got it. In some systems with a controller, you can actually couple your auto feeder with your feed mode on your pumps. So take advantage of some of those systems and make sure you're giving all of your fish time to collect that food before it ends up resting into some corner of your aquarium. Okay, and that brings us to our next topic, which is not using auto feeders. Auto feeders are great, especially if you're gonna be away from home often, or you're on vacation, whatever the case may be, but it ensures that you're allowing your fish those smaller amounts more frequently all the time. So we've got a couple different types of auto feeders up here. Jason, walk us through some of the pros and cons of these.
Exactly, so these are gonna be the most popular auto feeders that we have today. This Eheim is relatively low in price, easy to program, very reliable, but what it doesn't have is the ability to work in feed modes with your other equipment. So that's where something like the Neptune AFS comes in handy because you can program your feed mode along with your power heads, return pumps, etc., so you don't waste food.
Yeah, nice, and that couples in with several of the topics that we've talked about in this video, making sure that you're feeding your fish frequently, you're not making them chase down the food, and you have some equipment maybe out there to help you out. So hope you guys have enjoyed this. We'll see you next time.